You know how they say the ones closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most? Well, turns out that's absolutely true. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and let me know where you're tuning in from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this all plays out. My name's Marlene Whitaker and I'm 67 years old. I've spent the last 43 years living in the same apartment in the Greenfield Heights neighborhood of Boston. It's one of those gorgeous old buildings built before the war. High ceilings, real hardwood floors, crown moldings, and big windows that open up to a view of Elmwood Park. My husband, God rest his soul, his name was Thomas, and we bought that place back in '82 for just $180,000. Today it's worth a little over $1 million. That home has been everything to me. My safe place, my nest, the walls that watched me raise my son Jeremy and store away a lifetime of memories. Jeremy's 42 now and married to a woman named Brittany Caldwell. And yes, that's actually her last name, which should have been my red flag from day one. They live out in Mapleton, New Jersey with their twin girls, Haley and Brooke, who just turned 15. Jeremy's in finance, makes a decent living, but it's never been enough to keep up with Brittany's taste for luxury. She's always been the kind who equates love with diamond jewelry and ridiculously expensive bedsheets. I've been watching their marriage unravel for years. Not just because I never really took to Brittany, although I didn't, but because I could see the money problems piling up like storm clouds. About 5 years back, Jeremy started coming to me for money. It started small, $1,000 here, $3,000 there. Always some story about temporary issues or surprise bills. I gave him the money because that's what moms do, right? We bail our kids out even when we shouldn't until suddenly it's just routine. Eventually, the amounts got bigger. Just last year I gave them $28,000. Jeremy kept swearing he'd pay it back. Said a bonus was coming or some big deal was about to close. But that money? It never showed. And still the requests didn't stop. Every time I caved, Brittany would send me one of her sugary little texts. Marlene, you're such a blessing to this family. We're so lucky to have you. Love you. I started feeling less like a mom and more like a bank with a pulse. Then the apartment itself became this unspoken battle. Jeremy would toss out comments during dinners. Things like, "Mom, isn't this place a little big for just one person?" Or, "Have you thought about moving somewhere smaller? The maintenance alone could buy you a cozy spot in Florida." Brittany would chime in, always smiling that fake smile of hers, suggesting retirement homes or assisted living communities like it was just friendly advice. But I wasn't born yesterday. I knew exactly what they were thinking. I'm a 67-year-old widow sitting on $1 million property, and to them I was already half in the grave. Planning my future was just their way of trying to speed things along. But here's the thing, they didn't realize I wasn't going anywhere. My mind's sharp, my health is solid, and I fully intended to stay in that apartment until the day they carried me out in a pine box. But something changed last winter. I guess the financial pressure on Jeremy and Brittany hit a new level because their behavior shifted. They got bolder. Brittany started showing up more, always with some reason. He just happened to be nearby. She brought over soup. She wanted to check on me. But during those visits, she'd walk the place like she was sizing it up, asking about my furniture, hinting at my finances, and quietly poking around about my will. "Marlene," she said once while eyeing my mother's china cabinet, "have you thought about what you'd like to do with all these beautiful things? It'd be a shame if they ended up in some storage unit." Meanwhile, Jeremy started harping on my safety. Said he worried about me being alone. Said the stairs were risky. Started suggesting I give him power of attorney just in case, of course. Told me horror stories about seniors getting conned or taken advantage of. Oh, the irony. Then 3 months back, Brittany began bringing real estate magazines with her. She'd leave them lying around, open to articles about the perks of downsizing or moving into senior-friendly places. She'd mention cute little condos she found in neighborhoods like Briarwood or Ashland, places that would be so much easier for someone my age. Always under the mask of concern, but we both knew what it was really about. Pure greed. The final straw came in February. Jeremy called one Tuesday evening, his voice full of fake urgency. Said they were in a crisis. Claimed Brittany's mom needed some expensive medical treatment. Said his company was going through layoffs. The girls needed money for prep classes. He asked for $50,000. Right away. I didn't say no, I just asked for more details. Wanted to understand what was going on. That's when he snapped. Yelled at me like I was the problem. Said I was selfish, that I was clinging to money while my own family suffered. He said I was living in the past, hoarding an apartment I didn't need while they barely got by. I'll never forget that tone in his voice, that cold entitlement, that absolute blindness to everything I'd already sacrificed for them. It felt like I was talking to a stranger who just happened to wear my son's face. That call didn't just change our relationship, it shattered something deep inside me. Not because I said no. I actually gave him the money in the end. But that moment peeled back a layer I tried to ignore. I wasn't his mother anymore. I'd become a walking asset, something to tap into until there was nothing left. After that night I started noticing things I'd brushed off before. Like the way Brittany would sneak photos of different rooms when she thought I wasn't looking. Or how Jeremy kept asking all these oddly specific questions about my building's co-op rules and policies around ownership transfers. Even the looks they'd shoot each other whenever I brought up long-term plans. They weren't subtle. I decided to hire a private investigator. I know it sounds dramatic, but when you're pushing 70, you get a sixth sense for when people are lying straight to your face. My lawyer recommended someone named Denise Harper, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in domestic cases. I told her I had this gut feeling Jeremy and Brittany were plotting something around my apartment, and I wanted the truth. What she uncovered was worse than anything I'd imagined. 4 months, they'd been meeting with real estate agents, asking for appraisals, studying market trends for units in my building. They'd even sat down with attorneys to discuss guardianship petitions and competency evaluations. Turns out they'd toured several senior homes too, not out of curiosity but to collect pricing details and waitlist info. And the most damning thing? Denise found out Brittany had been in touch with the building's management company, posing as my concerned daughter-in-law, asking all kinds of just-in-case questions about estate sales and transferring ownership within families. They were laying the groundwork to erase me from my own life, and they'd been careless enough to leave a paper trail. But nothing hit harder than the recording Denise played for me. She'd captured a conversation between them and a real estate agent. The agent asked plainly, "So Mrs. Whitaker is on board with selling?" And Jeremy, my own son, replied without missing a beat, "My mother's getting older. She's been struggling to keep up with finances. We just want to protect her assets and make sure she's safe." Then Brittany added, "The key is getting her moved before she makes decisions she can't reverse." They had no intention of asking for my consent. They were going to take everything and spin it as kindness. That recording, it changed something in me. You can forgive a lot in life. Bad choices, desperation, even betrayal. But what you can't forgive is someone coldly, deliberately planning to take everything from you while smiling in your face and calling it love. I sat there in Denise's office for 2 hours, going over transcripts, looking at photos of them walking through nursing homes, reading emails between Brittany and agents like this was all some business deal. My hands didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I felt something far more dangerous than sadness or rage. I felt clarity. For 42 years I'd done everything for Jeremy. I worked night shifts as a nurse to pay his college tuition. Wore the same shoes for years so he'd never have to go without. I accepted Brittany into the family even when I had my doubts. When they hit money troubles, I opened my wallet without hesitation. I gave them everything, and all they saw was an obstacle they needed to remove. That night I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I was going to take them down before they could do the same to me. But I wasn't going to be reckless. I was going to be smart, methodical, and absolutely relentless. Over the next few weeks the plan began to take shape. I knew them well enough to guess their next moves. They were greedy but not smart. They thought I was just some naive old woman who'd never catch on. That kind of arrogance is dangerous. It was going to be their downfall. Step 1 was figuring out exactly how they intended to pull this off. Denise helped me install tiny cameras and audio mics around the apartment. Nothing fancy, just enough to catch everything they said and did. Then I waited. And I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, Jeremy called and asked if we could have a family dinner at my place. Said he wanted to bring Brittany and the girls over for a relaxing evening together. That Saturday I slipped into the role of doting mom and grandma like it was second nature. I made his favorite, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans, and I showered Haley and Brooke with love like I hadn't seen them in forever. But I watched everything. Jeremy spent most of the evening snapping photos around the apartment, pretending it was for memories, but I knew better. He was cataloging everything I owned for valuation. Brittany, meanwhile, steered the conversation toward my daily habits, how often I got out if I had friends nearby, how I was feeling. On the surface it was small talk. But I knew what she was doing, building a case that I was slipping mentally. The twins, bless their hearts, had no clue what their parents were up to. They were just happy to see me chatting away about school and their friends, completely innocent. But watching Jeremy and Brittany use their daughters as part of their manipulation, it turned my stomach. They were willing to throw away my bond with those girls, all for money. After dinner, while I was in the kitchen washing dishes, I heard their voices, low and hushed, coming from the living room. Every word was picked up by the hidden mics I'd had installed. "This place is in better shape than I expected," Brittany whispered. "We could easily list it at 1.2 million, maybe more." Jeremy answered, "The key is moving fast once we get guardianship. We can't give her time to fight us or change her will." Brittany added, "Dr. Richard Beck already agreed to do the mental evaluation. He still owes you that favor from the golf course, remember? One session and she'll be declared incompetent." Then she asked, "What about the girls? They're gonna ask questions when their grandma suddenly disappears into some nursing home." Jeremy said, "We'll tell them she's sick and needs special care. They'll adjust. Kids forget fast." I kept washing dishes, my hands steady, my breath calm. But deep down something snapped. Not like a break. More like something out of place finally clicking into position. They were planning to erase me, take my home, cut me off from my granddaughters, and stash me away somewhere like I didn't exist. And they spoke about it like it was a business deal. Over the next month I saw their plan unfold in real time. Dr. Beck, the doctor Jeremy golfs with, started calling me out of the blue. Said he was doing wellness outreach for seniors in the area. Wanted to schedule an appointment to talk through some things about cognitive health and planning ahead. I declined politely, but he kept pushing, implying that not wanting medical advice was itself a sign of decline. Brittany, meanwhile, stepped up her visits. She'd show up without warning, all concerned, and spend hours picking my place apart. If the faucet in the guest bathroom dripped, I must be incapable of home upkeep. If I forgot to take my vitamins one day, clearly my memory was going. If I left a pot on the stove too long while answering the phone, well, that was practically a fire hazard. She started bringing printouts about elderly folks who died alone from accidents, her expression always the same soft mask of concern. "Marlene, I just worry about you being here by yourself. What if something happened and nobody knew for days?" Jeremy took a different route. He began showing up with papers. Said they were just standard precautionary forms. Updated emergency contacts, healthcare proxies, financial powers of attorney. He'd spread them out on my dining table like he was doing me some grand favor, saying things like, "Mom, you've got to think practically. What if you have a stroke or a fall? How will anyone help you if your affairs aren't in order?" I played along, asking questions, acting hesitant, giving him just enough to believe I was slowly giving in. But I never signed anything. There was always a reason. I couldn't read it without my glasses. I needed to check with my attorney. I needed more time. And each time I saw Jeremy get a little more frustrated. My hidden recorders caught everything. Dozens of conversations between him and Brittany, discussing strategy, laying out their timeline, even estimating profits. They talked about me like I was already gone. Brittany had already started browsing new furniture online, planning to redecorate what she thought was going to be their new place. But the moment that sealed their fate came on a Thursday night in early May. I pretended to be napping in the bedroom when they let themselves in with the spare key I'd given Jeremy for emergencies. Maybe they thought I couldn't hear, or maybe they just didn't care anymore. "We can't wait much longer," Brittany said, her voice tense. "The market's hot now, but it won't last forever." Jeremy replied, "Dr. Beck's ready to file the report whenever we tell him. But we need to be careful with the timing. If we rush, she'll catch on and push back." "She already knows," Brittany snapped. "Did you see the way she looked at those papers? She's suspicious." "Doesn't matter," Jeremy said. "Once Beck declares her unfit, she won't have any say. We'll be her legal guardians and we'll do what's best for her." And then Brittany laughed. Actually laughed. I can't wait to see her face when she realizes what's happening. All these years of acting like she's above us, judging everything. Well, now she'll finally learn who's in control. Jeremy added, "That nursing home in Millstone has a spot next month. It's far enough that she won't get many visitors, but close enough for us to pop in when needed. Just enough to keep up appearances." "And her stuff?" Brittany asked. "Some of this furniture is worth something. We'll keep what we want and get rid of the rest," Jeremy said. "She won't need much where she's going." I lay there listening to my own son and daughter-in-law plan to throw me into a facility and strip my life bare. And what I felt wasn't panic. It wasn't even sorrow. It was a sharp, crystal-clear hatred. Clean. So, they weren't just taking my home or my savings. They were stealing who I was. My independence, my dignity, my right to exist with purpose. That night after they left, I called Denise Harper and told her it was time. We'd been preparing for this moment. She already had everything set. The fake buyers, the forged paperwork, the carefully built illusion that would flip their greed back on them. But before we set it all in motion, I had one last act to play. I needed them to believe they'd won. I needed them to feel smug, confident, like the finish line was in sight. So, I invited them over for a family dinner that Sunday. I got everything ready to play the part of the broken, foggy-minded old woman one more time. When they arrived, I could see it in their eyes. That glint of triumph, like wolves circling something wounded. Jeremy had a fresh stack of documents and Brittany had a list of charming little facilities she thought I'd love. I looked at them across my dining table. Same table where I'd fed them, celebrated holidays, helped Haley and Brooke with schoolwork. And then I smiled. You know, I said, my voice calm and steady, I've been giving a lot of thought to what you both said about downsizing and getting help. Maybe it is time. The look of relief that washed over their faces, it was almost funny. They truly believed they'd broken me. But here's the thing, there's a big difference between a good revenge and a perfect one. A good revenge gives you satisfaction. But a perfect revenge, that's when you get your peace while watching your enemies destroy themselves from the inside out. What Jeremy and Brittany never understood was that after 4 decades of outsmarting hospital red tape, insurance companies, and every kind of bureaucratic nonsense as a nurse, I had learned a thing or two about bending paperwork and building convincing illusions. The plan Denise Harper and I came up with was simple, elegant, and airtight. We weren't just going to stop them, we were going to let them think they'd succeeded. We were going to let them sell my apartment. Or at least let them believe they were. The buyer? Completely fake. The funds? Fabricated. And by the time they realized they'd been had, they'd be so tangled in legal messes they wouldn't know which way was up. But to pull it off, I had to keep playing my part. So for the next 2 weeks, I became exactly what they wanted me to be. The frail, confused mother who had finally given up. I signed off on the initial forms for Dr. Beck's so-called wellness evaluation. I let Brittany take me to tour senior living places, nodding like I was impressed by things like art rooms and pill organizers. I even agreed to let Jeremy set up a meeting with a real estate agent. It was all a performance and every second of it fueled my fire. Every time Brittany smiled and squeezed my hand like I was being so brave, every time Jeremy talked to me like I was already halfway gone, I felt my resolve harden even more. They had no clue they were walking right into a trap. The real estate agent Jeremy picked was this slick young guy named Travis Bowen, ambitious, hungry, and just shady enough to go along with whatever Jeremy wanted. He specialized in estate deals, and you could practically see him counting his commission the moment he stepped into my apartment. While Jeremy and Brittany laid out the story, how I was ready to transition into assisted living, Travis nodded along, barely looking at me like I wasn't even in the room. "We need to move fast," Jeremy said. "Her condition is unpredictable." Travis just smiled. "I completely understand. Happens all the time with our older clients. Speed is the key here." I kept up my act, asking silly questions, pretending I was overwhelmed and leaning on Jeremy for every little decision. Travis ate it up. He thought I was just an obstacle that had already been pushed out of the way. What Travis didn't know was that Denise had already done a deep dive into his business history. He'd been flagged twice for shady behavior with elderly clients, and word was he was behind on his mortgage payments for a flashy condo in downtown Brooklyn. In other words, the perfect partner for a con job. Someone who wouldn't look too closely at a deal that smelled fishy. The buyer, Denise set up, was a company called Cedarstone Property Group. Looked legit from top to bottom. Full paperwork, business licenses, even a rented office in Midtown. On paper, the company was headed by a man named Robert Langley, supposedly a property investor converting units into luxury short-term rentals. In reality, Cedarstone was a shell company created by one of Denise's contacts, a retired FBI guy named Lloyd Hardy, who now worked private security jobs. The office staff were temps, told they were part of a confidential real estate operation. And Robert Langley? Just an actor named Mike McKean who made a living playing corporate types in sting setups. The brilliance of it all was how easy it was to play on Jeremy and Brittany's greed. When Travis told them he had a cash buyer willing to pay $1.2 million, well over what the apartment was worth, they didn't question it. They just saw dollar signs. Travis told them, the buyer's under pressure to close in 30 days due to a project deadline. That's why he's offering so much. Jeremy lit up. That's great. We'll have Mom moved out by then. Brittany, already ahead of herself, was tapping away on her phone, making lists of what furniture to keep, what to sell, even looking up beach resorts to recover, after getting me the help I supposedly needed. But I had my own deadline to keep. The only way this would work was if they were in so deep, so thoroughly committed to the scheme, that there'd be no easy way out once the trap closed. That meant I had to get them to take big, irreversible steps, like signing paperwork, spending money, taking legal action. That's what would seal their fate. The first piece? Power of attorney. So I staged a little episode one day, just enough confusion to worry them. I started expressing doubts about the sale, saying maybe we were rushing into things. Jeremy dropped his nice guy act for just a second, just enough for me to see the anger underneath. Mom, we've already been through this, he snapped. You agreed. The papers are signed. The buyer's ready. You can't back out now. I don't remember signing anything, I said, letting my voice tremble. Maybe I should call my lawyer. Brittany leaned in fast. Marlene, sweetie, that's exactly why you need help. You're not thinking clearly. Scott should handle this for you. They went on for an hour, guilt-tripping me, making me feel scared, saying all the right manipulative things to wear me down. Eventually, I reluctantly gave in and signed the power of attorney forms, making Jeremy my legal rep for the sale. But here's what they didn't know. The apartment had already been moved into an irrevocable trust the week before. My lawyer was the trustee. That meant the documents Jeremy had were completely useless. But more importantly, by tricking a supposedly mentally unfit person into signing legal documents, they just committed elder abuse. A serious felony here in Massachusetts. And guess what? Every word, every sigh, every lie, they were all caught on camera. Denise had it all. Video proof that they'd coerced me, called me incompetent, and still pressured me into signing legal papers. The case against them was shaping up beautifully. Over the next 2 weeks, Jeremy and Brittany threw themselves into prepping for the riches they believed were already theirs. Jeremy walked into his boss's office and announced he was taking early retirement to care for his aging mother. Brittany, meanwhile, started house hunting in upscale New Jersey neighborhoods. She began putting down deposits on fancy furniture, drawing up remodeling plans, and dreaming big. They even went ahead and enrolled Haley and Brooke in an elite private school, telling the girls they were about to receive a financial blessing that would change everything. Those poor kids were thrilled, completely unaware their parents were building this fantasy on the theft of their own grandmother's home. Watching Jeremy and Brittany use their daughter's excitement to justify their own cruelty didn't just make me angry. It ignited something deeper, colder. A kind of hatred that burned with the clarity of ice. All the while, Robert Langley was playing his part to perfection. He visited the apartment multiple times, asking detailed questions about building policies and amenities. He scheduled professional inspections and arranged an official appraisal, all paid through checks from Seedstone Property Group's legitimate-looking business account. Everything seemed real, even to Travis, the real estate agent, who was practically drooling over his commission. He spent hours taking Jeremy and Brittany to see similar properties, helping them plan out what they could buy once the deal closed. He even set them up with lawyers and financial advisors, convinced they'd need help managing their sudden windfall. The contract signing took place on a Wednesday morning in Travis's office. Jeremy showed up in a tailored suit, beaming, with Brittany on his arm, snapping photos like it was their wedding day. I played the bumbling, uncertain mother flawlessly, asking the same questions more than once, worrying aloud about what would happen to my things, and generally acting like I was just along for the ride. Robert Langley arrived right on time with his attorney by his side, another actor from Denise Harper's team. The documents were real, drawn up by actual lawyers, following every legal requirement for a standard Massachusetts real estate contract. The only catch: Seedstone Property Group never intended to buy anything. Jeremy, of course, signed with flair, confident, smooth, like he'd already won. Brittany took a dozen pictures to remember the moment, and Travis popped open a bottle of champagne to toast the deal. I just sat back and smiled politely, counting the minutes until their world would fall apart. The closing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. That gave Jeremy and Brittany just enough time to dig themselves in deep, making irreversible financial commitments, while giving Denise and her team plenty of room to gather every last piece of evidence. But the best part? It was still coming. Because when you build your future on lies and fraud, the whole thing tends to fall apart exactly when you're least ready for it. As we left Travis's office that morning, Jeremy wrapped an arm around my shoulder with a rehearsed kind of tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "Everything's going to work out just fine. You'll see." For the first time in months, I agreed with him wholeheartedly. Those next 3 weeks were the most entertaining I'd had in years. Watching Jeremy and Brittany dig themselves deeper with every smug step was better than any Broadway show I'd ever seen. They were drunk on future wealth and it made them reckless. First, Jeremy hired a moving company before the closing had even gone through. He scheduled them to come pack up my apartment exactly 1 week after the supposed sale. When I asked about it, still playing my part, he gave me that practiced, patronizing smile. "Mom, we've got to stay organized. The nursing home's ready for you. There's no reason to delay." What he didn't know was that Denise had already spoken to the movers. She told them she was my legal representative and that removing any of my property without signed authorization would be considered theft. The movers were now part of our investigation, ready to document every step of the attempted burglary. Meanwhile, Brittany's spending habits spun out of control. She put a deposit down on a $450,000 house in an exclusive New Jersey suburb, telling the sellers she was expecting a sizable inheritance to come through in just a few weeks. She bought a brand new Mercedes-Benz, confident she'd have the cash in no time. But the most absurd of all? She booked a $25,000 European vacation for the whole family, a celebration trip, she called it. Jeremy went all in too, hiring a pricey interior designer for the new house, and Brittany enrolled in a $40,000 per semester master's program. They even started touring beachfront properties in Cape Haven, putting earnest money down on a little cottage they wanted to use as a weekend getaway once the inheritance came through. Every one of these moves left a digital footprint. Denise had arranged full financial surveillance, tracking their credit cards, checks, wire transfers, everything. They were building a mountain of evidence that would bury them alive. But nothing was more damning than what came out of their own mouths. My apartment was still wired for audio, and the recordings we collected showed their true colors. For hours they talked openly about their plans, like I didn't exist. They argued about which of my things to sell, which nursing facility would be cheap enough to park me in. "That place in Millstone is ideal," Brittany said during one conversation. "It's far enough away that Marlene can't go calling people to complain. And if she does get noisy, we'll just move her somewhere quieter." Jeremy laughed. "By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. We'll already have guardianship and full control over everything. She'll be out of the picture." They even planned what they'd tell Haley and Brooke once I was suddenly gone. Their story was that I'd suffered a mental collapse and needed intensive care, so severe I couldn't see family. Over time they'd just let the girls forget I ever existed. "Kids bounce back," Brittany said, totally unfazed. "They'll miss her at first, but they'll get used to it. Especially when they see how much nicer our life is without her always interfering." Dr. Beck was busy too, preparing his fake mental evaluation, set for 2 days before closing, timed perfectly to give Jeremy the legal cover he needed. What he didn't know was that Denise had already filed a formal complaint with the state medical board. His license was about to be suspended, and now every evaluation he'd ever done was under review. Watching Jeremy and Brittany in those final weeks was the most satisfying part. The illusion of wealth went straight to their heads. They started treating everyone around them like staff. Jeremy strutted around like a financial genius, bragging about smart planning and giving people unsolicited retirement advice. Brittany started spending afternoons in high-end boutiques, racking up thousands in credit card debt, convinced she'd pay it all off soon. The arrogance was staggering. They truly believed they'd beaten the system, beaten the law, and outsmarted me. They saw themselves as savvy, upwardly mobile entrepreneurs who'd found a solution to a problem, me. It never once seemed to bother them that the problem was their own mother. Their children's grandmother. 1 week before the closing date, I finalized everything. I met with my real attorney, Not the actor they thought was helping me, but the sharp, unshakable Joan Eshu who'd handled my affairs for the last 15 years. Joan and I went over everything one last time. The trust was airtight. The paperwork transferring my apartment out of my name and into the trust couldn't be challenged. Not by Jeremy, not by anyone. We finalized the criminal complaints that would be filed the moment Jeremy's fraud was complete. Then I met with Denise Harper for one final review. Every piece of the plan was ready. The fake closing would play out just like Jeremy and Brittany expected. But instead of walking out with $1.2 million, they'd be walking into a room full of law enforcement. Since their scheme had crossed state lines and touched financial institutions, it was now a federal crime, carrying up to 20 years in prison. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Denise asked me. "Once we trigger it, there's no undoing it. Your son and daughter-in-law will be facing serious charges." I didn't flinch. "Detective, they stopped being my family the day they decided to steal my life and toss me aside like garbage. I'm ready." The night before the closing, Jeremy and Brittany came over for what they thought would be our last dinner together. They brought takeout from a fancy restaurant, trying to mask their guilt behind food and fake smiles. Jeremy gave some ridiculous speech about how proud he was to care for me in my final chapter. He talked about how hard the decision had been, how I'd be safer and happier in the assisted living place. Brittany kept nodding along, patting my hand like I was a fragile bird. She even brought photo albums from the nursing home, pages of smiling old folks doing crafts and eating together. "You're going to love it there, Marlene," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "You'll make so many friends. We'll visit all the time, I promise." I nodded, asked a few questions about the visiting schedule and the food, and pretended to go along. But inside I was counting the hours until everything came crashing down on them. After they left, I walked slowly through my apartment. I ran my fingers across the dining table where Thomas and I had shared 1,000 meals. I looked at the framed photos from the years when Jeremy had still been my son, not the predator he'd become. Tomorrow justice would come. But that night felt like the funeral for the family I thought I had. The closing was set for 10 a.m. at Travis Bowen's office. Jeremy showed up early, dressed like a Wall Street executive and carrying a leather briefcase. Brittany looked like she was heading to a party, smiling wide, already imagining their new life. Travis was practically bouncing with excitement over his commission. Robert Langley was already there with his attorney, plus 2 others posing as reps from Cedarstone Property Group. The room was staged perfectly, documents laid out neatly, fancy pens in place, a bottle of champagne on ice. What Jeremy and Brittany didn't notice were the extra staff lingering around the office, or the maintenance workers stationed at the exits. They were so focused on their imagined payday, they didn't see any of the red flags. The meeting started just like they'd planned. They reviewed the contract, gathered signatures, and Jeremy confidently signed the final papers, transferring what he believed was my apartment. Travis handed him a cashier's check for $1.2 million, made out to him as my legal representative. For 17 whole minutes, Jeremy and Brittany believed they'd gotten away with it. Then Denise Harper stepped into the room, followed by 6 police officers and 2 federal agents. "Jeremy Whitaker and Brittany Caldwell," she said firmly. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and theft of property exceeding $1 million. Jeremy's face went pale so fast I thought he'd faint. Brittany launched into hysteria, yelling that there'd been a mistake, that they were victims of a scam. Travis scrambled for his phone, likely to call his lawyer. I just sat there, quiet, watching the wreckage unfold. It was more satisfying than I ever imagined. I saw every emotion pass over Jeremy's face. Shock, confusion, rage, panic, and finally, the blank stare of someone realizing they've lost everything. Brittany, meanwhile, threw herself at Denise, screaming that it was all a setup, demanding lawyers, threatening to sue. "This is insane," Jeremy shouted as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "That apartment belongs to my mother. I have power of attorney. This is a legitimate sale." Denise didn't even flinch. "Mr. Whitaker," she said calmly, "your mother placed that property into an irrevocable trust 3 weeks ago. The power of attorney you forced her to sign? Legally worthless. And we have video proof, hours of it, showing you coercing a woman you claimed was mentally incompetent into signing documents you knew she couldn't consent to. That's elder abuse, and it's a felony." When the truth sank in, Jeremy looked at me like a man who had just woken up in his own nightmare. "Mom," he whispered, his voice dry and hollow. You did this? I looked him in the eyes without blinking. I protected myself from thieves. That you happen to be one of them is your burden, not mine. Brittany was still shrieking as they led her out in cuffs. She shouted about lawyers, swore they'd sue everyone in the room. Jeremy just stared at me, his face frozen in shock as the weight of what he'd done began to sink in. But they weren't the only ones in handcuffs. Travis Bowen was arrested on the spot as an accessory to fraud. Dr. Richard Beck was picked up from his office within the hour. The entire scheme unraveled in one morning. Everyone involved learned the hard way. Stealing from the elderly isn't just immoral, it's illegal. And the fallout kept coming. The house Jeremy and Brittany tried to buy? The seller kept their deposit and sued them for breach of contract. Brittany's new Mercedes? Repossessed. The European celebration vacation? Non-refundable, they lost every cent. But that was just the start. Jeremy's former employer stripped him of his pension. Brittany's graduate school expelled her for lying about her finances. The private school they enrolled Haley and Brooke in revoked their admissions, citing irregularities in the paperwork. Within a single month they lost everything. Their house, their cars, their savings, their reputations, gone. They ended up crammed into a rundown apartment in a rough part of Millstone. Ironically, just a few blocks from the very nursing home where they'd planned to stash me away. The only part of it all that ever truly weighed on me was what happened to Haley and Brooke. My granddaughters hadn't done a single thing wrong, yet they paid the price for their parents' greed. They lost their home, their school, their friends, the entire life they knew. Eventually they asked what had happened to Grandma Marlene. And Jeremy and Brittany for once had to tell the truth. That they'd tried to steal from me. That they got caught. I did feel sorry for the girls. But not sorry enough to forgive their parents. Brittany once said, "Kids are resilient," back when she thought she could erase me from their lives without consequences. And you know what? He was right. The girls adapted. They overcame. Which is more than I can say for their parents. The legal process stretched out for months. Jeremy and Brittany hired lawyers they couldn't afford, sinking deeper into debt as they tried to fight charges they had no chance of beating. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, financial documents, and testimony from everyone they involved. Dr. Beck tried to cut a deal, but Denise Harper had him on tape naming his price for a fake evaluation. His license was revoked and he got 3 years in federal prison. Travis Bowen's crimes extended beyond my case. He had a history of targeting elderly clients and forging documents. He was sentenced to 8 years and ordered to repay dozens of victims. But nothing compared to the justice that hit Jeremy and Brittany. Federal and state charges combined carried 30 years. Their lawyers urged them to take a plea, but they insisted on a trial, convinced they'd win sympathy. They didn't. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2 days. The jury saw the videos, heard them laugh about putting me in a home and plot to steal everything. It took just 4 hours to convict them. Jeremy got 15 years. Brittany got 12. Maybe they'll get parole, if they ever show remorse. I doubt it. After sentencing, Jeremy's lawyer told me he was sorry and hoped I'd forgive him. I said, "Tell him love doesn't steal or lie." What he felt wasn't love, it was entitlement. "I don't forgive that." The lawyer said, "But he's your son." I replied, "He was. Now he's just a criminal who shares my blood." 6 months later I got a letter from Haley. She was living with Brittany's sister, trying to finish school and understand what happened. I wrote back the same day, told her I'd always love her and Brooke, that her parents' choices weren't hers. I set up college funds and helped where I could. I also made it clear, Jeremy and Brittany would never be part of my life again. 3 years have passed. I'm still in my apartment overlooking Elmwood Park. Haley's in college studying to be a teacher. Brooke's graduating soon and plans to study law. They visit often and we've built something strong. Something rooted in truth, not obligation. Jeremy and Brittany remain in prison. They've sent letters, apologies, pleas, even threats. I haven't read a single one. Denise sends them to my lawyer to keep on file. People ask if I feel guilty. I don't. I didn't destroy Jeremy's life. He did that himself. I just made sure he couldn't destroy mine. Some betrayals are unforgivable. Some people deserve your silence more than your mercy. They thought I was weak. What they didn't know is that underestimating someone can be the most costly mistake of your life. Justice may not be pretty or kind, but it's necessary. That's my story. That's the truth. And I sleep just fine knowing they're exactly where they belong. Don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. And remember, family is about love, loyalty, and respect. The rest is just DNA.